Star Trek, Primitive Passenger, Season 5, Episode 10. Doomed to repeat. The vast emptiness on the edge of Enconite space stretched in all directions, an inky void broken only by the few nearby systems. The Havok hung suspended on the edge of this cosmic no-man's land, its inky black hull absorbing what little light reached it. Inside the cavernous hold, Nolan Mercer stood before a captured Dominion battlecruiser, its purple hull gleaming under the harsh lights. He ran a hand along its smooth surface, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Lexa," he called out, his voice echoing in the vast space. "Begin full systems diagnostic on our new toy. I want to know every inch of this ship's capabilities." Lexa walked out from the bridge to stand beside him, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. Already on it, initial scans show their long-range sensors are far more sophisticated than ours. We might be able to locate suitable resources for our journey home. Nolan nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. Good. Start with the nearest systems. We need deuterium, dilithium, anything that can boost our propulsion capabilities. As Lexa set to work, Nolan made his way to the bridge. The familiar hum of the ship's systems did little to quell the unease gnawing at him. They were farther from home than any human had ever ventured, with barely enough resources to make it back. Alara was sitting at the nav station when he entered. "Nolan, I've been analyzing our position relative to both galaxies. The journey back won't be easy." "When has it ever been?" Nolan quipped, settling into the captain's chair. He called up a holographic display of their surroundings, the two galactic disks floating like distant islands in a sea of darkness. Alara's expression remained serious. "There's something else. The stellar formations, the background radiation, they're off. Different from what our records indicate they should be." Nolan's brow furrowed. "What are you saying, Alara?" Before she could respond, Lexa's voice cut in over the comm. "Nolan, I've got something. There's a small planetary system about 2 light-years from our position. Preliminary scans show promising deuterium deposits." "Plot a course," Nolan commanded, pushing aside his concerns for the moment. "We'll deal with one problem at a time." "Key." Nolan stood on the bridge of the captured Dominion battlecruiser, his hands moving deftly over the alien controls. Beside him, Lexa's reassuring presence, her eyes darting between holographic displays. "How are we looking, Lexa?" Nolan asked, guiding the ship toward the coordinates of the planetary system. Lexa nodded, her expression one of concentration. "All systems nominal, Nolan. The Dominion's sensor array is impressive. We're picking up detailed scans of the system's 3rd planet." As they approached, the planet came into view on the main screen. It was a barren world, its surface a patchwork of grays and browns, with no signs of life or civilization. "There," Lexa pointed to a flashing indicator on her display. "Massive deuterium deposits concentrated in the northern hemisphere. And Nolan, these readings, it's completely untapped." Nolan's eyebrows shot up. "Untapped? In this day and age?" "Confirmed," Lexa replied, her voice tinged with excitement. "The quantity is staggering. We've never encountered deposits this rich or this pure." A slow smile spread across Nolan's face. "Well, well. Looks like our luck is turning. Let's call in the cavalry." With a few quick commands, Nolan opened a channel to the Havok. Alara's face appeared on the screen, her expression curious. "Alara, we've hit the jackpot," Nolan announced. "Bring the Havok in. We're going to need every bit of cargo space we can muster." As the Havok approached, its massive form dwarfing the Dominion cruiser, Nolan and Lexa coordinated the mining operation. Beams of energy lanced from both ships, carefully extracting the precious deuterium ore and beaming it directly into the Havok's cavernous hold. Hours passed as they worked, the hold slowly filling with glittering piles of raw deuterium. Nolan watched the process from the Havok's bridge, a sense of triumph building within him. "Alara," he called out, "start configuring the industrial replicators." We're going to need a refining facility to process all this ore. Ilara nodded, her hands moving over her console. Already on it, Nolan. I've drawn up preliminary designs based on our most efficient models. We can begin construction immediately. As the refining facility began to take shape in the hold, tenders assembling the unit piece by piece as it came off the replicators, Nolan allowed himself a moment of optimism. They were still far from home, but with this unexpected bounty, their chances had improved dramatically. Well done, everyone, he announced to his AI companions. Let's make every bit of this count. We've got a long journey ahead of us. Little did Nolan know, the journey would be longer and more complicated than he could possibly imagine. Ilara and Lexa exchanged a silent glance, the weight of their shared secret hanging between them. The untapped deuterium deposits were just the first clue to the true nature of their predicament, a truth they had decided to keep from their captain, at least for now. Months had passed since the Havok's fortuitous discovery of the deuterium-rich planet. The ship's hold, once cavernous and empty, now hummed with activity. The refining facility worked tirelessly, processing the raw ore into usable fuel. Nolan had pushed his crew and his ship to their limits, determined to gather enough resources for the long journey home. Nolan stood on the bridge, reviewing the latest progress reports when Ilara's voice broke the relative silence. "Nolan, I've detected something concerning," she said, her tone grave. Nolan looked up, his brow furrowing. "What is it?" Ilara brought up a holographic display of the surrounding space. Tiny points of light represented the remnants of the Dominion fleet they had pulled into this intergalactic void. "The remaining Dominion ships," Ilara explained. "They're reforming, but they're not heading toward their home galaxy. They're moving toward the Encanite galaxy." Nolan's eyes narrowed as he studied the display. "That doesn't make sense. Why aren't they trying to make it back to their own galaxy?" Lexa leaned into the display. "Two possibilities come to mind. Either they don't know which way to go, or they think this is their best chance for survival," Nolan finished, his voice grim. Ilara nodded. "Given their limited resources and the vast distance, it will take them centuries to reach the Encanite galaxy at high warp." Nolan paced the bridge, his mind racing. They must be cannibalizing their own ships for resources, and the Jem'Hadar, they'll need to keep breeding them for crew replacements over generations. "It's a desperate move," Lexa added. "But for a species as adaptable and determined as the Jem'Hadar, it might just work." Nolan leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "That's no way to take over a galaxy," he mused, shaking his head. "The Jem'Hadar are all male, short-lived, and dependent on Ketracel white. The Vorta and Jem'Hadar can only reproduce by cloning." Ilara tilted her head, considering his words. "You're right, Nolan. Their long-term survival prospects are slim at best. I'm sure they are only doing this because there is one or more founders on board," Nolan continued, his eyes fixed on the holographic display. "They've set a course to keep the founder alive at all costs. It's the only explanation that makes sense." Lexa nodded in agreement. The Jem'Hadar's unwavering loyalty to the founders would drive them to such extremes. But even with their determination, the odds of success are astronomically low. Nolan stood up, stretching his arms above his head. "Well, it's not our problem. We've got our own journey to worry about." He turned to face his AI companions. "How are we looking on the resource front? Do we have enough to start planning our trip back?" Ilara brought up a new display, showing their current inventory and projected needs. "We've made significant progress, Nolan. The deuterium reserves are at 87% capacity, and we've managed to synthesize a substantial amount of dilithium. However, we're still short on some key components for long-range travel." "Such as?" Nolan prompted, his eyes scanning the data. "We need to reinforce our structural integrity field generators," Lexa chimed in. "The stress of multiple long-range jumps could tear the ship apart otherwise." We also need to upgrade our navigation systems to handle the complex calculations required for intergalactic travel. Nolan nodded, his mind already working on solutions. All right, let's prioritize those upgrades. Lexa, you're on structural integrity field enhancements. Alara, keep the mining and refining in motion. Let me know if we need to pick up anything else. As his AI companions set to work, Nolan turned his attention back to storage of materials and shedding the tailings after refining. The distant glow of the Milky Way beckoned, a reminder of home and all they had left behind. Yet he couldn't shake a nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right, that there was more to their situation than met the eye. Pushing the thought aside, Nolan focused on the task at hand. "We've got work to do," he announced. "Let's make every second count. The sooner we're ready, the sooner we can start the trip home." Little did Nolan know that home was not just a vast distance away, but also lost in the currents of time itself. As Alara and Lexa exchanged another silent glance, the weight of their shared secret grew heavier. The true nature of their predicament and its far-reaching consequences remained hidden, a ticking time bomb waiting to reshape the future of two galaxies. The Havok hummed with barely contained energy, its systems primed and ready for the monumental journey ahead. Nearly a year of scavenging, refining, and upgrading had transformed the ship into a long-range marvel, capable of making the vast leaps necessary to bridge the gap between galaxies. Nolan stood on the bridge, his eyes sweeping over the readouts one final time. Alara and Lexa flanked him, their expressions a mix of anticipation and hidden concern. "Final checks complete," Lexa reported. "All systems are go for our first jump." Nolan nodded, then turned to Alara. "What's the status on our Dominion friends?" Alara brought up a holographic display. "We've tracked 697 Dominion ships continuing their journey toward the Enconite galaxy. Their progress is slow but steady. I still can't fathom how they've managed this long," Nolan mused, shaking his head. "They must have a Ketracel White production facility on one of those ships. Clever bastards." "Indeed," Alara agreed. "Their determination is impressive, if misguided." Nolan's lips quirked into a half-smile. "Well, let's give them a little parting gift, shall we?" He turned to Lexa. "Is our care package ready?" Lexa's eyes gleamed with mischief. "Prepped and primed, Nolan. One large container packed to the brim with high-yield explosives, emitting a tantalizing power signature. It should be quite the surprise when they stumble upon it in, 50 years or so." "Perfect," Nolan chuckled. "Deploy it as soon as we make our first jump. With any luck, it'll set them back significantly when they finally reach it." As the final preparations were made, Nolan couldn't help but feel a twinge of excitement. This was uncharted territory, a journey no human had ever attempted. "All right, ladies," he announced, settling into the captain's chair. "Let's make history. Initiate the first jump." Alara and Lexa moved to their stations, their hands dancing over the controls. The Havok's engines roared to life, the power building to a crescendo. "Jump sequence initiated," Alara called out. Braced for transition in 3, 2, 1, 2, 1. The universe seemed to bend around them, space-time folding in ways that defied comprehension. For a split second, Nolan felt as if he was being stretched across the cosmos, his very atoms singing with the strain of the jump. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The Havok snapped back into normal space, the star field on the view screen markedly different. "Jump complete," Lexa announced, her voice tinged with satisfaction. "We've covered approximately 1/5 of the distance to the Milky Way. All systems functioning within normal parameters." As Nolan absorbed this information, Alara added, "Care package deployed successfully. It's on a trajectory that should intersect with the Dominion fleet's path in approximately 53 years. Nolan allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They were on their way home, and they'd left a nasty surprise for the Dominion stragglers. But as he gazed at the unfamiliar stars, He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "Well done, both of you," he said, pushing aside his unease. "Let's prepare for the next jump. I'll head out to the hold. Keep the dilithium moving." As they set about calculating the next leg of their journey, Alara and Lexa shared another silent exchange. They were guiding the Havok not just through space, but through time as well, carefully adjusting their course to ensure they arrived in the correct era. The weight of their secret grew heavier with each jump, the potential consequences of their temporal displacement looming large. Little did Nolan know, their journey home was reshaping the very history they sought to return to, setting in motion events that would echo across millennia. The Havok's massive engines thrummed with power as it prepared for another monumental jump. In the cavernous hold, Nolan worked tirelessly, directing tenders and carefully measuring refined materials to reload the reactor chutes. "How's it looking down there, Nolan?" Ilara's voice came through the comm. Nolan wiped sweat from his brow, checking the readouts on a nearby console. "Almost there. Another 200 kilos of refined deuterium, and we'll be ready for the next jump." "Understood," Ilara replied. "We're almost done with the calculations for the next leg." As Nolan returned to his task, Ilara and Lexa stood on the bridge, monitoring the ship's systems and the vast emptiness of intergalactic space around them. Lexa turned to Ilara, her expression troubled. "We need to discuss our current situation." Ilara nodded, her eyes never leaving the console. "You mean the fact that we've traversed not just space, but time as well?" "Exactly," Lexa confirmed. "The implications are staggering." As they worked, guiding the ship through its fourth major jump, their conversation continued. "We're shaping our own horrific history," Lexa mused. "Those Dominion ships we left behind, they're going to become the Mestat, aren't they?" Ilara's hands danced over the controls, making minute adjustments to their course. "It seems inevitable. But if we interfere, if we prevent the Dominion from becoming the Mestat, then we erase our own existence," Lexa finished. "No Mestat war means no reason for Nolan to be awakened. No Little Wing, no us." "Jump complete," Lexa announced, then added, "Nolan, we're ready for the next fuel load." "On it," came Nolan's reply through the comm. As Nolan worked to refuel the engines, Ilara and Lexa's discussion deepened. "Should we tell him?" Lexa asked, her voice low. "About the time displacement, about the Dominion becoming the Mestat." Ilara shook her head. "Think about it. If Nolan knew, he'd want to stop it. He'd see it as his responsibility to prevent the Mestat war before it even begins." "But that would change everything," Lexa realized. "All the events that led to this moment undone." "Exactly," Ilara confirmed, "not to mention the psychological toll on Nolan. Knowing that the billions of Mestat he's killed were Dominion descendants, it could break him." Their conversation paused as Nolan's voice came through again. "Refueling complete. Engines are optimal. We're ready for the next jump." "Initiating jump sequence," Lexa responded, her hands moving swiftly over the controls. As the Havok made its fifth jump, bringing them ever closer to the Milky Way, Ilara and Lexa exchanged a meaningful look. "So we say nothing," Lexa concluded. "We guide him home, both in space and time, without revealing the full truth." Ilara nodded solemnly. "It's our burden to bear. For the sake of the timeline, for Nolan's sake, and for our own existence." The ship shuddered as it completed another successful jump. The familiar shape of the Milky Way grew larger on their view screens, a sight that would have filled them with joy if not for the weight of their secret. "Final jump preparations underway," Ilara announced through the comm. "Nolan, we'll need one last refueling. This is the home stretch." As Nolan worked diligently in the hold, blissfully unaware of the temporal complexities surrounding their journey, Ilara and Lexa stood side by side on the bridge. They were the guardians of a secret that spanned millennia, the architects of a predestination paradox that would shape the fate of two galaxies, and Nolan Mercer himself. The Havok surged forward, carrying them across the vast cosmic distances, hurtling not just through space, but through the very fabric of time itself. The Havok's engines pulsed with a final surge of power as it completed its last monumental jump. The familiar starscape of the Milky Way filled the viewscreen, a sight that brought a collective sigh of relief from the crew. Nolan strode onto the bridge, his face etched with fatigue, but his eyes bright with triumph. "Holy shit, we did it, ladies. We're home." Ilara and Lexa shared a quick glance, their secret weighing heavily between them. "Indeed we are, Nolan," Ilara responded, her voice carefully neutral. "Shall I begin transmitting our return coordinates to Empire North?" Nolan nodded, settling into the captain's chair. "Do it. Let's see how things have developed in our absence." As Ilara sent out the encrypted transmission, Lexa brought up a holographic display of local space. "Initial scans show no signs of ongoing conflict in the Alpha Quadrant," she reported. Nolan leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. Good. Looks like our little maneuver with the Dominion fleet paid off. But let's not celebrate just yet. We need to know if the Dominion managed to regroup, or if something else has filled the power vacuum." A response came through from Empire North. Nolan activated the comm channel. In the face of his operations chief, a grizzled Tellarite named Groznik appeared on screen. "Commander Mercer, by the stars, it's good to see you," Groznik exclaimed, her bristly face breaking into what passed for a smile among her species. Nolan nodded in acknowledgement. "Gross, status report. How have things developed since the Dominion fleet disappeared?" Groznik's expression turned serious. "It's been quite the year, sir. After the Dominion fleet vanished in the wormhole, the war effort crumbled. Most are crediting the prophets with the intervention, but there are plenty of theories floating around." "I bet there are," Nolan muttered, exchanging a knowing look with Ilara and Lexa. "And the current situation?" "Tense, but stable," Groznik replied. "The Cardassians are in disarray. The Klingons are posturing, and the Federation is trying to keep the peace. Your operations have continued as planned. We've been able to expand a bit in the power vacuum left behind," she added. Nolan nodded, absorbing the information. "Good work, Gross. We'll be docking at Empire North within the hour. Prepare a full briefing." "Aye, sir," Groznik responded, then added, "Oh, and Commander, we have several data packets from Kilana that have been waiting for your return. Shall I transmit them to the Havok?" Nolan's interest piqued. "Yes, send them over. I'll review them en route. Mercer out." As the transmission ended, Nolan turned to Ilara and Lexa. "Well, ladies, it seems our little intergalactic adventure had the desired effect. I need to analyze those data packets from Kilana." Ilara set a course for Empire North. As the Havok moved through familiar space, Nolan couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. They had successfully derailed the Dominion's invasion plans, potentially saving billions of lives in the process. Yet, as Empire North grew larger in the view screen and the data packets from Kilana began to download, he couldn't shake the feeling that their journey had set in motion events far beyond their initial intentions. Little did he know, the true magnitude of their actions, spanning both space and time, was about to be revealed. The information waiting in Kilana's messages would shake the very foundations of Nolan's efforts, not just of recent events, but of his entire existence. As the Havok approached Empire North, Nolan's personal datapad chimed, signaling the arrival of Kilana's data packets. His brow furrowed as he quickly scanned the first few lines. "Change of plans," Nolan announced abruptly, his voice tight with sudden tension. "Lexa, alter course. We're heading to M471. Ilara and Lexa exchanged puzzled glances. "The Class M planet in the system you acquired from the Federation?" Ilara asked, curiosity evident in her tone. Nolan nodded, his eyes never leaving the datapad. "That's the one. And encrypt these data packets. Level 10 security clearance, my eyes only." Understood, Lexa responded, her hands dancing over the controls as she adjusted their trajectory. M471 coming up. The Havok, ever sturdy, made yet another blink. Finally, as they entered orbit around M471, Nolan made his way to the Havok's massive hold. There, nestled among the other ships and equipment, sat the Lost, a sleek Delta-Quad vessel Nolan had relied upon for centuries. "I'm taking the Lost planet side," Nolan announced over the comm. "Ilara, Lexa, continue on to Empire North as planned. Maintain radio silence unless it's an absolute emergency." Whatever was in those data packets had clearly shaken him. "Nolan," Ilara began, concern evident in her voice, "are you sure that's wise? We've only just returned, and I need to deal with this personally." Nolan cut her off, his tone brooking no argument. "I'll rendezvous with you at Empire North when I'm done. Eyeing both girls, and no one needs to know anything about where we've been or where I'm heading. Got it?" Before either AI could protest further, Nolan had boarded the Lost and blinked from the Havok's hold. The smaller ship streaked through M471's atmosphere, quickly disappearing from sensors as the atmos superheated around it. On the Havok's bridge, Ilara and Lexa stood in stunned silence, watching as the Lost vanished from their screens. "What do you think was in those data packets?" Lexa asked, her voice low. Ilara shook her head, her expression troubled. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's big." I've rarely seen Nolan this intense, at least outside of a battle situation. As the Havok turned away from M471 and set course for Empire North, both AIs couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of something monumental. The weight of their temporal secret seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. Bus, bus, bus. Meanwhile, on the surface of M471, the Lost touched down in a remote, mountainous region. Nolan emerged, his face set with determination. Making his way to a hidden entrance carved into the mountainside, Nolan keyed in a complex security code. As the door slid open, revealing a high-tech facility beyond, he took a deep breath. The door slid open silently, revealing a state-of-the-art facility bustling with activity. But Nolan barely registered the scientists working diligently at their stations. His eyes were drawn immediately to the figure emerging from the main laboratory, Anna. Her violet eyes locked onto his, brimming with emotion. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, as if a dam had broken, Kilana rushed toward him. Nolan opened his arms, enveloping her in a powerful embrace. Kilana buried her face in his chest, her body shaking with quiet sobs. Around them, a few scientists looked up, smiling softly at the reunion before respectfully returning to their work. "I thought I lost you," Kilana whispered, her voice muffled against his shirt. Nolan tightened his grip, one hand cradling the back of her head. The familiar scent of her, the warmth of her body against his. It all hit him at once, and he realized just how much he had missed her. After what felt like both an eternity and not nearly long enough, Kilana pulled back slightly, her violet eyes searching his face. Without a word, she took his hand and led him through the complex. They passed through corridors lined with advanced equipment, Nolan's mind racing to process everything he was seeing. Finally, Kilana paused before a set of ornate doors. As they slid open, Nolan was momentarily blinded by the burst of natural light. Blinking, he found himself in a massive arboretum, a geodesic dome arching high overhead. The warmth of real sunlight caressed his skin, a stark and welcome contrast to the cold depths of space he'd grown accustomed to. But it wasn't just the sunlight that caught Nolan's attention. In the distance, scattered throughout the lush greenery, were dozens of young adults. They moved in small groups, engaged in animated discussions or breaking off for what appeared to be study groups. Nolan's brow furrowed as he watched them, an inexplicable sense tugging at him. Kilana's hand found the back of his neck, her touch grounding him. She leaned in close, her breath warm against his ear as she whispered, "We did it." The weight of those 3 simple words hit Nolan like a physical force. His eyes widened as realization dawned, pieces falling into place with dizzying speed. He turned to Kilana, his voice barely above a whisper, thick with emotion. "Are they—" Kilana nodded, a mixture of pride and solemnity in her violet eyes. "Gus, 1,400 of them, all individuals. No defects in the survivors." Nolan's breath caught in his throat. "How many did we lose?" Kilana placed a gentle hand on his arm. "You can't look at it that way, Nolan. We lost small batches until we got the formula right. Later, there are always losses. By randomizing the code, you're naturally going to lose a percentage." Her voice trailed off, allowing Nolan to process the information. His eyes scanned the groups of young adults, each one unique, each one a miracle of science and determination. "Full lifespans?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "From everything I've seen, yes," Kilana replied, a note of triumph in her voice. "Telomeres will hold a little over 100 years. She paused, watching Nolan's face closely. "We can go talk with them if you like." Nolan stood silent for a moment, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had accomplished. These weren't just experiments or ideas anymore. They were people, individuals with their own thoughts, dreams, and potential. Finally, he nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'd like that. I want to meet them." As they began to walk towards the groups of young adults, Nolan's mind considered questions, possibilities, and the weight of the responsibility he now bore. This was more than just a scientific achievement. It was the beginning of something entirely new, something that could change Nolan's galaxy. And as the warm sunlight bathed them, Nolan realized that this journey, their journey, was just beginning. Epilogue. The darkness of Nolan's private quarters on Empire North seemed to press in on him, almost tangible in its intensity. He lay motionless on his bed, eyes wide open, sleep, a distant concept lost in the maelstrom of his thoughts. The events of the past year, the revelations of the day, all churned relentlessly in his mind. Finally, unable to bear the silence any longer, Nolan spoke into the darkness. "Ilara, if the Dominion fleet makes it to the Enkanites' neighborhood, won't they just infest like humanoids do? And one day, won't the Enkanite decide to exterminate them too?" Ilara's voice, soft and measured, filled the room. "I don't know, Nolan. I guess I hadn't thought about it." The lie hung heavy in the air between them. Nolan's brow furrowed deeply, creating a map of worry lines across his forehead. The silence stretched on, broken only by the faint hum of the station's systems. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Some other poor fuck is going to get sucked up to fight the next Dominion war for the Enkanite." "The next Mestat war," Ilara corrected gently. Confusion colored Nolan's tone as he responded. "No, they'll be fighting the Dominion, not the Mestat." The statement hung in the air, half question, half assertion. Ilara's voice took on a hesitant quality. "Nolan, I learned something while we were there. I didn't know if I should tell you." "Let's have it," Nolan said, tension evident in his voice. "Mestat Nolan," Ilara began, each word carefully chosen. "It's not an alliance, or a faction, or the name from some planet or region. It's a classification." Nolan's eyes darted around, his interest piqued despite his exhaustion. "Classification for what? What does it mean?" The pause before Ilara's response seemed to stretch for an eternity. Finally, she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Humanoids. Humanoids." The word hung in the air, heavy with implications. Nolan closed his eyes, the weight of this revelation settling over him like a suffocating blanket. The silence in the room grew thick, almost oppressive, as the full impact of this knowledge sank in. After what felt like hours, Nolan's gruff voice cut through the darkness. "You shouldn't have fucking told me." With a rustle of bedsheets, he rolled over, turning his back on the room and the crushing weight of understanding.